So Jeane Gutierrez, I'm actually with a company called Slate 828 Productions, and we're actually filmmakers focused on people. So we do documentaries on ordinary people, just as yourself, because what we do is we love to tell stories, and we think it's very important. So we love the fact that this topic, there's a reason for that. My background is actually was in sales, and I sold software to older adult population. And my husband is actually a filmmaker in Hollywood. For 20 years, he directed, produced, and edited short format films. So we came together right before the pandemic, and we thought, gosh, we really need to put a lens on people. We've got great stories and we want to capture it. So without further ado, all ties into what Jay does with genealogy. It's very, very important to document that. So I'm going to share my screen and tell you why it's so important to be able to tell your story. So bear with me while I figure out how to do this. Um, okay, can you all see my screen? Okay, so basically, with this topic, I wanted to say that, there's a lot of surprising benefits of telling your story. And we all know that there's people that tell you everything, right? We run across some others, you have to ask a question 10 different ways, but only get one word response. Well, we're all different in that way when we tell stories. So whether it's good news or major adversity, it turns out that research shows that there are some major psychological and emotional advantages to sharing your story with others. And so we'll talk about that. The first one is that we really find strength by sharing our story. We all have stories about good times and bad times that you share with your family and friends, overcoming hardships and heartache, discovering the secrets to some of our life's greatest joys. And sharing those experiences with others is not only empowering, it can really light the way for those who are walking a similar path. And what I mean by that is think about, yourself or your others in your family and friends who are veterans. They have those same stories about serving together. A cancer survivor, losing a child or losing a parent, addiction, regrets, but then wonderful things like unlikely friendships, learning from failures, the joys of a tender moment, life achievements. Those are great things, and we find strength in sharing stories because other people may have gone through them as well. The other benefit psychologically, emotionally, it helps to reaffirm our own values. Sometimes you learn things about yourself from the act of writing or storytelling that helps to clarify the things and people that matter most to you. And then the third surprising benefit of telling your story is that, you really have a lot to offer more than you realize. Sharing the bad and good really helps us all come together as human beings because it's healing. I mean, let's be honest. It takes a lot of courage to share your story, especially if it includes, those imperfect little quirky bits about you, everything that you've learned, sometimes through the hard way, through your experiences. So it's in this unfiltered story that will free yourself to be your authentic self. And your story oftentimes is made more powerful when it connects to your family history because it gives you context or a frame of reference, especially when you tell that. So here are 5 benefits of knowing your family history. Did you know that learning about your family history can actually increase your happiness? That's right. There's studies that show that. So these are the 5 benefits. The first one, it gives you a sense of identity. And so it's pretty life-changing because nothing is more eye-opening than learning who you are, learning about your ancestors, the family traditions, embracing your culture, understanding where you came from. It really can open your eyes about how beautiful you and unique you all are, right? And it also can give you a better sense of self-worth and belonging. The second thing is it makes you more resilient. The reason for that is because let's face it, we all know that life can be hard sometimes. But back in the day, life was even more hard. Uh, maybe your past family members faced some terrible tragedies and heartache, and some things that were pretty impossible to overcome, but they did overcome them. So, learning about their stories and how they got through those difficult times can definitely give you courage that you need to get going, and makes you more resilient when you're facing those challenges yourself. It helps you connect with others. What I mean by that is when you learn about your family history, there's some amazing effects on where you connect with others, especially because it allows you to connect with people not only from present, but the past and also the future. Um, and what that does, that forming connections, it's critical to a fulfilling life. And a lot of studies show that sometimes that means it's a longer life. Four, it makes you a better human. What that means is your ancestor stories can really shape you in a more grateful, happy, empathetic, and compassionate version of yourself. So, an example is you may discover that your great great grandfather lived through the Great Depression, and that he had to work hard to provide for his family, which may inspire you to work as hard as well, or your kids and your grandkids. Whatever stories there are in that whole treasury of family history, now is the time to unearth it. And lastly, we've all been to the doctor. We fill out those patient histories in the office, and they ask you about family history of high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer. Well, learning about things like that can give you a lot of information on what health concerns run in your family, and more importantly, what you're at risk for, where your kids and grandkids would be at risk for. And knowing that information can really help them and you make good choices regarding your health, and help you live a healthier lifestyle. So finally, all of that kind of combines, and there's a huge importance in leaving a legacy, because it's really sharing a connection that's lasting. As we get older, the idea of legacy really, really becomes important. I mean, we've all told stories about our childhood, and those stories are passed down from our parents and our grandparents. But unfortunately, if they're not shared, they're often lost forever, right? So, what I'm going to talk about in the part two, is more details about this. But the company that I have, Slate A28 Productions, is a good way to capture that story, other than writing and telling about it, is really filming it, leaving that legacy for others to see and capture it through film. And the reason that's so powerful is that you're able to capture your idiosyncrasies, your personality. It really captures the flavor and essence of the person. Many of us think that we haven't done anything extraordinary with our life to warrant filming, but that's so untrue, because it's ordinary people we are, that our loved ones want to know after we're gone. So it's a great way to kind of capture that. And in the second part, I will show you how you can do that very easily in a do-it-yourself manner, all the way to having someone like our company help you do it for you, where, even if you don't like being in front of a camera, it just kind of melts away. So without further ado, that's a good segue into how to really discover your roots. Hold on. I'm sorry. Before I do that though, I wanted to show you kind of an example of what it looks like when you are able to capture your story on film.
Went into music and had a band, and we actually won the new band contest on Dick Clark's Happening 68.
The Bluesbird Jam! would get my guitar case because they're lined with velvet, and I could sit in there and play in guitar cases. But my dad played the big bass fiddle, and I would climb on it and kind of like it was a horse or something. And now it's in the Hank Williams Museum in Montgomery.
8 years old, almost go to elementary school. But that time, Taiwan was occupied by the Japanese. Japan controlled all Taiwan.
And speaking of Sundays, I mean, it's a family joke, but on Sundays, especially in the summertime, Dad would make homemade ice cream and Mom would bake a chocolate cake. And that was our supper on Sunday nights during the summer.
Sergeant Major on, I don't know what happened to him. I didn't know who to write or whatever, because I always felt down deep that I would go back someday and I would look him up. But I've never been back to Vietnam.
我说1块钱就买一张彩券，那我也没有不经意了，就随便一刮，哦，这1万块是真的还是假的？哎，再看了一次也是1万块，就是好开心啊！就打电话跟我2个女儿讲，我说你们2个人1个人500块。
That's good. That's good.
How can you have you? So that was just an example when you capture that, how that can really be shared with everyone. And now Jay will talk about how to discover your roots.
Okay, thanks. And hi, everybody. I'm going to see if I can share my screen now. Hold on just a sec. Oop. Almost there. There we go. Can you all see that? All right, I'm Jay Schneider, and I am a retired person from IBM. So I'll talk a little bit about that when we start talking about technology. There's so much stuff out on the internet today that oftentimes you can do a lot of research right from your home. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I did, and then I'm going to talk about some steps that I went through so that my project was successful. Talk about some of the pitfalls that I ran into, so hopefully you won't find yourself in the same hole that I did. Talk about getting organized and planning a little bit up front. How to get started. There's some things that you can do today to get started. I'll give you a couple tools that you can start off with. But then when I go into a more deeper dive next month, I'll go more into some of the documents that you will uncover, what you can look at and find, what you can look at and what you can find from those documents, and some other tips along the way. But I'll talk briefly about some of the resources that I used. You're more than welcome to start digging into those a little bit, but there's lots of things you can do right now to get started. So a little bit about my project. I've been interested in my genealogy for a long time. I come from a very large German-based family, and I started by going to Cobb County Genealogy Society class in 2014. I did do a search on their website, and I have it listed here. They are still holding classes, but probably due to COVID, I didn't see the beginners class that I attended, but you might want to reach out to them, see if they're going to start that up if you're really interested in getting into it. It was a very good class. It was, if I remember right, it was 5 or 6 sessions on Saturday, like 3 or 4 hours each. So it was a nice class. But one of the first things I did after that is trying to figure out, what do I want to accomplish when I'm through with this whole project? Because I knew it was going to be a lot of research. And one of the thoughts that came to my mind is, after my mom passed away, after the viewing the night before the funeral, we all went over to her house, and my 10 brothers and sisters, spouses, and all 40 some odd grandchildren were all there. And we just started reminiscing about the different stories and what it was like growing up. And we were just having a grand old time. And more than one person told me the next day that their cheeks hurt from laughing so much that night. And I didn't want those stories to be lost. And so one of the things I did is I asked my cousins and my siblings to write down stories about what it was like growing up. And so I've documented those stories, along with other stories I've uncovered. I even was lucky enough to uncover something about my great-great-grandfather walking through the woods so he could go to church 9 miles away, which was a wonderful discovery. But I documented 17,000 individuals through those 6 years of research. And it was quite a daunting task. And all of those 1,700 come from 8 couples that immigrated from Germany. And so I tried to get into the German area, but during World War II, a lot of those records were destroyed with all the bombing that went on over there. And I really was struggling with that. So I decided to concentrate my efforts on the original immigrants to current day. So I eventually published a two-volume book. The first book is all of those stories that I had sent to me and have uncovered. And then the second volume is a 712-page report that this program that I use generated. And I will be doing a demo of that program. And it was free, didn't cost anything to download it from the internet. It was a wonderful program, and I'll be doing a demo of that on the next session. So let's talk about the steps that you should go through. One of the things that I did not do was sit down and organize myself. And because I didn't do that, I talked about the plan. I did that okay, and what my goals were. But when it got to being getting organized, I just started throwing everything I had into files. And the next thing you know, it was so unruly. It took me days to go through those files and get them organized. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. There's lots of things that you know right now. You know who your parents are, your siblings are, who your grandparents are probably. You might even know who your great-grandparents are or beyond. So we're going to talk about documenting some of that stuff already. That's stuff you can do today. Then I'll talk about research and analysis, and then finally making sure that you document everything that you find. So planning and organizing and setting your goals. Let's talk about setting your goals first. In order to have a successful project, you need to have a goal on what that project's going to be at the end, or else you're just going to be wandering all over the genealogy world. If you're, think about it, are you interested in a particular person or a family branch? Is this going to be a hobby? Are you going to write a book? No matter what you do, make sure that you break your project down into small pieces, or it will be just too daunting of a task to get through. So break everything down into small little pieces, and then you can always put it together at the end. Focus. Here's another thing that I struggled with. If I uncovered something that I thought was pretty interesting, I would try to wander off and do something different. But try not to multitask. You're going to uncover people that you've never heard of before, and they're going to have similar names probably. So you're going to get confused. If you're anything like me, you're going to get confused very quickly. So try to stay focused on one thing at a time. And then finally, be methodical. You're going to find things out there that you're going to say, wow, that's kind of neat. What's that all about? Don't be the dog in the backyard that sees a squirrel on the east side of your yard, and then all of a sudden sees another squirrel on the west side of your yard and just yells squirrel and is running back and forth from one squirrel to the other and not getting anywhere. If you find something of interest, jot it down and go back later and then finish what it is that you're investigating. That caused me, for me not doing that, and I know exactly what happened when this happened, but I was researching a family tree, or a family branch, I should say, and I got onto something that I thought was really interesting, and I went after it. And when I was reviewing my information just before I went to publish my book, I realized I had an entire branch of my family that I had missed. And so I had to go back and start researching all over again. So don't fall in that same trap that I did. You will uncover tons and tons of documents. And so put together a strategy of how you're going to capture all this. Are you going to have, let me back up. You're going to have, vital documents like death certificates, birth certificates. You're going to uncover books, photographs, personal letters, maybe newspaper articles. If you don't have a strategy on how to organize this, you will never find it again once you store it away somewhere. So think of your house as maybe being this, or a room, I should say, as maybe being your genealogy room. And inside that room, you have a file cabinet that has drawers in it. What I did is I have a file for each person. And I have it, the way I named their files was their first name, their maiden name in brackets, their last name, and then the year that they were born. Of the 17,000 people that I documented, I only came across 2 people that had the first and last name be the same and were born in the same year. And in that case, I just used their middle initial. So that worked out really well for me. But think about, are you going to do this with hard copy? Are you going to store it electronically on your keyboard, on your computer, or are you going to have some combination of both? If you do store it on your computer, one thing that you can do is you can name every file that is the same type of file the same name. As an example, all 1870 census records can all be named 1870 census record. As long as they're stored in different folders, your computer will allow you to do that. So have a naming convention, because then when you want to go back to look at those, then you'll know exactly what file it is, what folder it is you need to go to, what document that you want to get it from, and it'll be very easy to retrieve it. So those are just a couple thoughts. And then the last thing here is documenting your family tree. That once again can be done on paper. And I've got a PDF file that I can share that Dawn will have out on the website. But you can download that and just click on it and fill in the blanks. And it's kind of nice. And I'll also be demoing an application that I used to document that. Now here's a sample of Windows. I'm an old IBMer, and so you'll never see me have a Mac in my house. I will always have an IBM based computer, or a Windows based computer. That Windows was originally created by, or the base of Windows was actually created by IBM years ago. But here's how I have mine set up. I have this big house called Documents, and inside this big house, I have a room called Genealogy. And inside this room, I have a bunch of file cabinets, and each one of them is the person's last name of each of the different families. in that folder, I then have a separate folder for each individual person with their first name, last name, and birth year. And then inside that folder, I have the different documents that I was able to uncover. So if you keep everything structured and organized, you'll be able to go back and look at them later. All right, getting started. You know a lot already about your family history. You might not think you do, but I'm sure you do. You know who your parents are, and you know, like I talked about earlier. Start documenting who they are. Make sure you capture the maiden names, because when you get into the trying to do searches, if you don't have the person's maiden name, you'll really struggle to get documents that are prior to when they became married. And so make sure whenever you get their maiden name, get that. Document their relationships. Document when they were born, and you know, when they died, who they married, if they got divorced, that type of thing. And start by interviewing your family members. And don't do what I did. Once again, don't put it off. By the time I got into this, I only had 2 aunts that were still alive on both sides of the family. I was fortunate to be able to interview one. She lived to be 103 and was still as sharp as a tack. But I was able to get a lot of really wonderful stories and information from her. And then fill out a simple family tree. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then get organized with your photos. And one tip about the photos is, for the photo name, put down who's in the photo, because if you're storing it electronically, you can make that file name as long as you want it to be. So I always put in L-R from left to right, and then I put their names in, so that when I go in and look at that photo later on, I know exactly who's who in the photo. Develop questionnaire for your before you go out and start interviewing different people. And if you go out in the internet, here's just some of them. I'm not going to go through all of these. Here's just some of them to think through, but make sure that they are open-ended questions. The goal here is to get them talking. Don't give them a yes/no question, where they can answer it yes, no, or maybe so. Get them talking. The more they talk, the more you will learn. And one thing I learned as a manager from IBM in interviewing is, you want to be talking about 20% of the time, and you want the interviewee to be talking about 80% of the time. So the more you can get them to talk, the better off you will be as far as gathering information from them. And also a quick note here too, if you go out on the internet and Google genealogy sample questionnaires, you will come up with hundreds and hundreds of sample questions that you can ask. Pick the ones that are interested in you, that will help you uncover the information that you're trying to uncover. Here is just a very simple family tree that I pulled together. You can put this down on a piece of paper if you want, but just capture the person's name, birth date, where they were born, where they died, and that type of thing, when they died. Like I said, Jeannie will have a file that will allow you to just go ahead and open up the file. You click on it and fill in the blanks. Very easy to use. There's also another file that I've shared with, or not Jeannie, but Dawn. There's another file I shared with Dawn that she'll put out there that allows you to capture information about a specific family, the parents and who their kids are and that type of thing. And here's a sample of what my program generated after I was done. I'm down here on the bottom with my wife, and here's our family. And these are all of my relatives from the immigrants down. It started out with 8 couples, generated 17,000 contacts for me. So we were a very prolific family. And there are reasons why people say that the saying you came from a good Catholic family, why that is, because we all there's a lot of large families, and I came across a couple of them that had 13, 14 kids, and I just groaned every time I came across those, because I knew I was going to be on that family branch for a long time. All right, resources that you can look at right now. Talking about interviewing your resources, family Bibles. If you have an old family Bible, what people used to do is write down all of the different generations in those family Bibles. The churches, synagogues, mosque records. Go to the local area where your ancestors grew up. They have a lot of information in those churches about the different families that used to go there. A lot of people have a lot of family photos that are just buried. After 6 years, I finally got my book published. And about 2 months later, one of my cousins sent me a photo of my great-grandfather that I had never seen before. He looked just like my little brother. And it was just wonderful to see those old pictures. When I talk through the next session, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to digitize those old pictures, how to maybe clean them up a little bit. It's quite easy to do, especially if you have a smartphone. You can just take a picture of it. And many of the pictures that I had, once I cleaned them up, they were far nicer than the original was, because I was able to very easily clean up some of those wrinkles and that type of thing. There are federal and state archives out there. There are, I think, 14 federal archives around the United States. One of them is in Morrow, Georgia, which is just south of the city. Right next to that is the state of Georgia's archive. And so it really would be a nice day trip to take a ride on down there and check both of them out, see what they both have. You can give them a call as well, just to see what they house. And each one of them houses something different. As an example, all of the World War I draft records are held in Morrow, Georgia. And so I was able to have them pull the record of my great-grandfather, or my grandfather, I should say. And I actually held the card that he signed, which was kind of cool. It was fun to see that. And another one is your local libraries where your family grew up. They all have, at least every one I've ever been into, have a genealogy section. A lot of people go ahead and donate books. I'm planning to donating my books to the local library in my hometown, as well as the local genealogical society, as well as the state of Michigan's state library. But there's lots of books that are there. They have lots of microfiche. They have lots of information in those libraries. They also have newspapers. Some are hard copy, some are on microfiche. And it's nice to be able to see. Unfortunately, my hometown is in Portland, Michigan. I would love to have gone there and spent a lot of time going through those old newspapers to see articles of my ancestors. But I did discover that the state of Michigan's library has the one and only issue newspaper that Westphalia, Michigan, which was where my ancestors grew up. They had newspaper only one time. It was one issue, and it was written in German. And the state of Michigan has a copy of that. So next time I get up to Michigan, my goal is to go there and get a copy of that and see if I can get it translated. And then there's also, just an example here too, of something that these libraries have. I went to the Marietta the one downtown, the main branch. And I have a great great uncle that was in the Civil War. They have an exclusive set of the correspondence between field officers and the headquarters officers during the Civil War. And I was able to uncover some pretty neat stories about him and his unit based on the officer that was there. So there's lots of information that the local libraries can handle, or that they have, I should say. And then finally, here are some of the things that I used in my research. Ancestry.com is what I primarily used. You do need to have a subscription to that, although Cobb County Libraries did. I'm not sure if they still do, but they used to be. You used to be able to go to any of their branches and access Ancestry.com for free. You can get a 14-day free trial just to try it out. Fold 3 is a wonderful resource for military records. You can get things like where all these people were posted from location to location, especially if they were in the war. It shows you exactly where they were at during their years of service. They have a 7-day free trial. That's also free at Cobb County Libraries, or at least used to be. And then Familysearch.org is a free site. It's very similar to Ancestry.com. You can get things like birth certificates, census records, death certificates. All of that's the same kind of stuff that is in there that is in Ancestry. It's free. It's organized by the Mormon Church, and doesn't cost anything. I do think that Ancestry has a little bit more information in it and is a little bit easier to use, but check out familysearch.org. It's free service, and you can do all kinds of stuff there and find all kinds of stuff there. Another wonderful website that I love is Find a Grave. This is just a list of all different types of grave sites around the states. And the thing that's neat about it is people can request to be editors, of which I'm one. So once you're an editor, you can go in and add different things like photos, death certificates. You can put links in between, who that person's spouse was, who their parents were, who their siblings were, who their children were. And a lot of people have done this for you already. So once you find somebody that you want, you can go ahead and click on all of those links, and it will take you to their record and see if there's anything out there. There are other family tree archivists that have their own family trees out there. In the libraries, you'll see them. You'll see them in Ancestry. You'll see them in Familysearch. A word of caution, they're not always accurate. One of the things that I did is I told myself, I'm not going to document anything unless I have a document that proves that that is indeed the case, that Mary Jane was indeed born in 1863. I wasn't going to take somebody's word for it because I found too many errors in other people's work. Local historical societies is another wonderful resource. Check where your family grew up. There's probably a historical society there of some sort. And that's where I found the story of my great-great-grandfather walking through the woods on Sundays to go to church. And he would, in winter times, it was dark by the time he went home, and he could hear the wolves howling and everything else. So it was really a nice story. And then finally, you can just go out and Google the person's name, and you'll be surprised how many times you will find something. I found a couple of things. I found is that the property that my wife grew up on was once owned by my great-great-grandparents. And I never knew that. Another thing I found was a 19 article of my great uncle and aunt celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary. And that's when I found out that he was in the Civil War and fought in the Battle of Kennesaw and Pickett's Mill and all the battles that are right around where I currently live today. So those were just a couple of the neat things that you can find. And I will tell you, you be prepared, but you might find some black sheep in your family. I'm fortunate, I haven't found any yet, but be prepared. You might find somebody that, serve some time in jail. Who knows? But at any rate, the next session I will be going through talking about the different documents that you might uncover, stuff to look for. I'll go through and do a demo of some of the like the family search, how to do that. Oftentimes putting in less criteria is better. I'll show you how to do that. Also show you the application that I use to capture everything, and show you some tips on how to improve some photos and how to digitize them. So with that, I will turn it back over to the whole group. And if you have any questions, I think now is a good time to ask them.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was fascinated because I've never heard of Find the Grave. Do all states have that Find the Grave?
It is throughout the entire United States. I don't know if they have any overseas or not, but every state has it, yes.
Is that, do you know, I mean, going back as far as?
As far as people put in.
Really?
So I was able to find my grandfather's gravesite. Actually, I was able to find my great-grandfather's gravesite. I do know that my great-great-grandparents were buried in a cemetery, but that there were two cemeteries in that home, and so that information or in that town, I should say. And so that information just kind of went away. So I wasn't able to find theirs, but I was able to go back to the late 1800s.
Interesting. Now, the reason why I asked that question is because I remember as a little girl, my grandmother taking me to a gravesite. I mean, I grew up in South Carolina. So I remember her taking me to a gravesite, and she was saying that's where her father was buried. But I think, through urban renewal and all of that stuff, I think they overturned those grave sites. And so that's why I was surprised that they actually had records.
Take a look. You might be surprised what you find. And the other thing you can do with that is you can request a picture of the gravesite if it's not already out there. And so every once in a while, I'll get a request to go out and take a picture of some grave sites that are local to me. And so there are other volunteers that will go out and do that for you as well.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Both the centers down in Morrow, just Georgia related?
It's for the southeast corner of the United States is where they focus primarily, but they do have some things for everybody, like the World War I draft cards. But if you go on the archives website, it will give you an overview of what each one of those locations have.
Okay.
Anything
I have
else?
a question. How do you handle the challenges of, like I have relatives that came through Ellis Island and the names were changed? Sometimes it was the last name or the first name were changed. The birth dates were not written down correctly.
That can be difficult. And you'll find that even on the earlier census records that the names are different.
All right.
So that's one of the areas that I found that other people's work helped, because they were able to I was able to get the correct spelling that they had put in their family tree. They had come across it somewhere, somehow. And then when I did a search on those names, I was able to find documents from them. But you're correct that when they came across, a lot of them Americanized their names. And I have a number of examples in my family tree that did that.
Yeah.
But that's a hard one. That's probably as difficult as if you don't have the maiden name getting them. But using other people's family trees and their research, that was very helpful for me.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
I think they're all overwhelmed in a good way.
Wait till you get into it. If you think you're overwhelmed
A lot
now.
of information to digest.
Yeah, I have one more question. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but you mentioned the military records. Do you have to prove that you are a relative of the person whose records you're looking for? What kind of information do you need?
If it's old enough, no.
Okay.
If you're, I think it's, what is it? 72, no. 72 years. If it's older than 72 years, then anybody can get that record and publish it.
Yeah, because this would be World War II I'd be looking for.
And you'll be surprised. One of the things I found, which I thought was very interesting, is I had 5 uncles from the same family that was in World War II. And somebody had put together a World War II enlistment website. And everybody that was from Michigan that was in World War II was in there. And it had newspaper articles about when they got enlisted and other things. And so the internet is a wonderful thing. There's some drawbacks to the internet, but there's some wonderful things out there as well that you can find. But if you go into the archives, you probably will be able to find things like, you know, your dad or World War II type records, I would imagine would be out there.
Great, thank you. I've learned a lot.
Good.
Yeah.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm an African-American woman, and 30 years ago, I researched my family's history, my father's side, and I was able to go back into 1865 to my great-great-grandmother. And at that point, everything just went nil. I could not find any information. Now, most likely they were slaves. So how do I go back and find who my ancestors were?
I've not run into that. And I'll just bless my lucky stars. I was born where I was. But looking at some of the TV shows, and I'm real interested in those genealogy shows, a lot of times they will have slave records, and a lot of times the slaves will take the last name of their owner. So if you look at the owner's last name, you know, do a search on just that last name of the person, you know, up to that point that you've, you know, lost track of them, you may be able to find a slave record, and the person's name isn't there, but their age is. So you may be able to narrow it down. But other than that, it's a real tragedy. But that, unfortunately, for the African American community, that's a lot of people hit a roadblock at that point.
Thank you.
Anybody
Anything
else?
else?
Well, Jay and Jeannie, I want to say thank you so much for volunteering your time. Obviously, you've both have a lot of passion for what you're doing. And what we're going to be doing from here, this is just kind of, if you can believe it, a brief intro into the legacy and the deep root dive. But the next session we're going to be having is with Jeannie, and that is actually on the 23rd, again at 3 o'clock. And then Jay will follow up with his session in April. So I think, Jeannie made a good point about bringing all what Jay's saying to life and how imperative that is to actually get the laughter, the whistles, and that shared engagement of the actual real person while they're still here. So I appreciate the fact that you're going to be showing us how to do that ourselves, and and then if we want to take it to the next level. So I think that's pretty valuable, especially while we all are still here and we've got some beautiful family members to be able to share that with. So I look forward to having you all join us for that one, and certainly any other thing we have going on.